Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the Advanced Mortgage Solutions podcast. Here with your host Joel Sadler, and our special guest today is Scott Miller, the owner and founder of Advanced Mortgage Solutions. So
Joel.
Scott, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
This podcast is a new labour of love that Scott's decided to put together and just share and give back to the community and really help educate the community in the property space. As he's confided with me prior to this recording, there's a lot of interesting decisions that people are making, getting themselves into a bit of grief, costing them thousands of dollars. So having education and understanding what you're doing is really important. So I'd like to introduce Scott. Obviously, you've got his name there, but I've known Scott for about 15 years or so, and always found him to be accommodating, really straight to the point, which is great, which you really need in this space, and really down to earth. There's so much smoke and mirrors in most industries and many industries, and Scott's definitely not one of those. You're going to get really good sound advice from him. His background is in logistics, management, and finance, so he's got great real world experience. And then he came back to New Zealand and passed his mortgage broker exams with the best in the country. So you can't get any better than that. I'm going to make you blush now, Scott. So you're in good hands today, guys and girls.
That was a while ago, Joel, but here we are. We're still here 20 years later. Yeah.
Yeah. Well done on that. I mean, I can imagine that it's not necessarily easy to pass. So Scott, look, I think this is obviously episode 1. We've talked about the need. At the moment, the market seems to be really focused on new buyers, people looking to come into homes. Prices have dropped back. We're in middle of August 2025. Prices have dropped back a bit. New home buyers are hoping to get into the market and on the ladder. Do you want to give us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll move into talking about those sort of new home buyers area?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Look, my first love wasn't finance. I sort of fell into that when I came back from the UK, like you said. I used the time in the UK to save a bit of money and had some favourable exchange rates and bought a few rentals while I was overseas and those sorts of things. Always had a bit of a knack with mathematics and those sorts of things, even in the younger days going through school. And it was my mortgage broker at the time sort of turned around to me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about becoming a broker?" And really the rest is history. 20 years later, I'm still doing it and loving it. And I suppose going back to how you opened it, part of the reason for today's talk at least is to say that there's just so many avenues of, let's just call it advice available out there. And a lot of it's not from a trusted source, so we're getting a lot of people, including my clients, sometimes going out and making decisions without really getting the message from someone that's actually at the coalface. And it is ending up costing them some money because the decision and the outcome of what they believed was the right thing to do turned out not quite to be the right thing to do, given where we are in the rate curve and the property cycle and all these sorts of things that really you really get a finer tuning and understanding of if you're in it day in, day out, like we are here doing the mortgage side of things.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, it makes sense. I've heard a few horror stories as well. So that nicely leads into the next question, Scott. What do you actually do as a mortgage broker / mortgage advisor now? What do you do? And why would someone need one?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, we've spoken about that, but tell us a little bit about the detail around what you do,
Yeah, look, it's a really good question, and I don't think it's been advertised out there into the masses to the level that it should be. We are now financial advisors. So although we hold a mortgage broker's hat, and that's what the public generally call us, we're fully ticketed financial advisors. So we've had to sit all the appropriate exams and specialist subjects and all those sorts of things to give that kind of advice. And then from there, using the years of experience and using the advice, we're there to give the client the best possible outcome for what they're looking to do. Because of the cost of ongoing compliance and all those sorts of things, largely some of the bigger institutions out there, the banks and the like, have sort of pulled back from the advisor space a little because they've got hundreds of staff and it would just become unaffordable and quite impractical to go and put all of their staff through the tickets that I had to hold and get and keep.
Yeah.
So you're finding that some of the frontline staff, at least at banks, aren't allowed to give advice because they simply haven't got the tickets that us mortgage brokers have. So the
Right.
biggest difference, I suppose, over the old days is really that we're giving advice that is up to date, it's qualified, and we have to go through ongoing educational support and training every year
Mm.
to ensure that we're keeping up to date and up to specs with everything that we do to hold that license. So you're really
Mm.
getting from the horse's mouth the actual information and advice that you required back with, being in the business for 20 years.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I think I also recently refixed a couple of mortgages that I've got, and the key thing that I noticed was about the value I got out of the mortgage advisor was the the experience of dealing with hundreds of people. Like you've said to me, you work
Yeah.
over a year, you work with a lot of people, right? So you're
Mm.
getting a really good viewpoint on the market and the issues and the rates and everything that's at play at any
Yeah.
given time, right? Where I would have
Yeah.
no idea because I'm not
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not in that space,
and you're not only
Mm,
looking at the rate curve
mm,
in the property cycle where you are at that
yeah,
time, listening to the chief
mm,
economists and what they have to say, or the Reserve Bank on their, sort of nods and fades on what they're looking to do with OGR announcements and cuts, which of course one comes tomorrow, which will be interesting. And
mm,
it's also what's happening in that person's life. Are they starting a new family? That's a completely
yeah,
different discussion than someone sort of wants to be as aggressive as they possibly can against their mortgage to pay it down very quickly. And typically when you're starting a young family, you're down to one wage for a while. So it's a completely different conversation on how to set that mortgage up to see you through those periods where their
mm,
income might be a little bit tight. And,
yeah,
and again, that plays nicely into what rates are doing at the time that we're having that discussion as well. So yeah,
yeah,
a pretty broad discussions had at the time of even what you would consider quite a simple process, which is to roll your loan over. So
yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah,
Hmm.
great. And then the other question that we see a lot of is how much does a mortgage broker cost? And there's quite a bit online. Of this mortgage broker, this person tried to charge me fees. Should they be charging me fees? So can you clear up that's not myth, but
Yeah.
the uncertainty around, how your industry works and charges or doesn't charge?
Yeah. I mean,
Mm,
traditionally we're paid by the banks. That doesn't stop a mortgage broker independently mandating a fee for their services, but that mandate
yep.
has to come up front. The client has to be aware of it. More than likely, if the broker was at any standings, they'd have that signed. So there was no disagreement after the fact.
Mm,
Personally, we've looked into that model and decided not to go down that track. So we have no fee, regardless of whether you go all the way through the process and eventually settle on a house, or, the timing just wasn't right. And for whatever reason, the pre-approval came to its end and naturally dissolved into nothing. And
yeah.
we'll go and meet those clients at another time when they feel the timing is right. So there
Mm,
is no wrong and right, but you'd certainly be one of the questions if you're meeting up with a mortgage advisor is to ask, is there any fees from you personally for the service that you provide? That
yeah.
way, there's no surprises later on.
Mm, that's sound advice. Yeah, definitely. Um, okay, so we're in the middle of August. You just mentioned that there may or may not be a rate cut tomorrow, so we won't get into predictions.
Yeah,
But obviously, in that sort of context, of rate cuts and I suppose some of the other bigger global things at play, and any other knowledge you have, what would be two critical or one to two critical, you know, pieces of advice you would give to a new home buyer at the moment in the current market?
yeah. Look, with the OCR announcement tomorrow, I think it's pretty likely that we're going to get a reduction. I think some of the pundits out there are really hoping for a 0.5% reduction, and I think it's more likely that we'll get a 0.25% reduction. And some of that, I believe, is already priced in. We've had some movements from the banks on their interest rates late last week. So that sort of indicates they are fairly confident as well that there'll be a reduction. So really, you're just waiting for the announcement itself from the governor of the Reserve Bank to say how big that cut's going to be, or yeah, unlikely that there's not going to be a cut. Um, with the current market, this is the fifth full cycle I've gone through of interest rates going up and then house prices going down and then interest rates going down, so house prices start to recover again. And this
Mm,
is the first time that I've really seen, we've had interest rates drop for about a year now, but we're only just seeing the sort of green shoots of increased house prices coming up around now. And that's really unusual. Like normally if there's an interest rate cut, house prices start going up and they're almost directly connected to each other. So it's been quite unusual in this aspect. So I think right now is a great time to buy a house. If you're in a position to buy a house, interest rates are relatively low and house prices are also relatively low. And that kind of perfect storm in a way isn't a usual kind of landscape that you would find yourself in. So yeah, like now's a really good time. There's some further rate reductions coming. And you mentioned the world economy, it's not in a particularly good place. I think you'll find the Fed in America are going to start dropping rates. Australia has started to drop rates. So there's a real sort of requirement for, the world economy to sort of get back on its feet and start chugging along and getting into some productivity again. And because of that, you're seeing those lower rates around the world to try and encourage that productivity. And we in New Zealand are just a little cork on the ocean of science. We've got no real influence on world, interest rates or anything like that. So we'll largely follow that lead as well. So I think you'll find another 1, possibly 2 years of low rates before we'll even see any increases in rates. So a good time. It's a good time.
Awesome.
Lovely.
All right, Scott, thanks for your words of advice today, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, Joel.